Hey guys, Miss Osuna here. Let's do our single welt pocket. So the first thing we have are the pieces, and we're going to sew the facing piece to our pocket bag. At the top we're 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and at the bottom we're sewing in the overlock. We sew on our welt. Remember that welt is literally only going to be sewn from the far left side of the welt to the far right side of the welt at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. I highly recommend you marking it with a ruler. So it's the width of the welt. You're just sewing at the most 1 stitch wider, but try to get exactly to the width of the welt, or at the most, once again, only 1 stitch wider. So this one is different from our double welt because we're only sewing a straight line on the welt itself, and then we're going to do the same. We're going to sew another straight line on the actual pocket bag itself. That's it. So you'll see, it's not so bad, but use a ruler, measure. Be very, very, very careful that it's a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And of course, backstitch at the beginning and end of your welt sewing. Up next, we're sewing the pocket bag to the shirt or pants or whatever your garment is. So that's the welt being sewn, and now let's get ready to sew the pocket bag. Remember, it needs to be face down, so face to face. Your pocket bag has a facing, and we want to make sure that it is face to face. So you'll see the bag is facing the garment, and you see the wrong side of it, but the correct side, face to face, is on the underside of what you actually see here, so that the right sides are facing each other for your pocket bag. Once again, measure with a ruler when you are sewing this pocket bag, because it has to be the exact width of your welt. So you're sewing at the 1/4 inch seam allowance on the same space where you've already connected the facing to the pocket bag. So it's on that same sewing line, but the width of it is the same distance as however wide your welt is from left side to the right side. So measure it. Now up next, we measure the cut, because we want to make sure that the actual cut is straight across horizontally, and then you want to do your triangles going to your stitches. Use a ruler, draw it in, make sure you cut close to those stitches, as close as possible, but not through. Here's the trick. Before you actually cut, you want to know that on the welt side, you want to cut through all the layers. But when you're cutting the pocket bag side, you only want to cut through the garment layer. So keep watching, but notice the difference. On the welt side, you cut all the way through, both layers. But when you are cutting your triangle on the garment side, you only want to be cutting through the garment layer, not the bag itself, because we want to sew it and we need the bag to be intact. Just keep watching and you'll see what I mean. Press, 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 press before you actually cut anything, and then press again after you cut on both sides. That only helps to make things better. Everything lays flat. Fold in half to get started, and then go on ahead and snip in the middle. That's how you get started. Once again, make sure you've drawn this cut line and your little triangle ends. Make sure you draw in those lines first. Okay, so right here you can see I'm looking to check to see if I have my welt side, because that's the side I want to cut through all the layers. So when you're looking, there's my welt, it's black, and now I know I'm cutting through the welt side all through all the layers. So do that on the left side of the welt and the right side of the welt. Cut through all the layers of the garment and the welt. But it's different for the bag. You separate the garment for your bag side, and you only cut the garment, not the bag itself. And then once you do that, we go on ahead and flip it to the inside. All right, up next we flip it inside out, and you know you are looking to see that you have the left and the right side very, very, very straight, and the top and the bottom. So push everything to the inside, make sure your triangle's in there, and press it, and look to see that it's all lined up. Okay, so you can see here that I have sewn the pocket bag on our upper portion so that we can see the facing when you peek through left to right on the same sewing line at 1/4 inch. And now we do the same for the bottom of our pocket bag. This part is very similar to the double welt pocket. Back stitch, of course, at the beginning and end. And now we want to sew those triangles. So make sure you fold everything out of the way. And you could even overlock right now at this point. I even recommend that. For some people, it'll be easier just to overlock right now. It just depends on your sewing level. But if you want, you can overlock before sewing in the left side and the right side of your triangle. And now it's time for the triangle. You know we've got to sew that triangle in at the heart of the triangle, all the way deep down inside. So make sure we start at the very top and go to the bottom of that whole entire triangle area. You got to get in nice and close to secure everything. Now that our triangles are sewn in, it's time for us to sew all the way down the entire pocket bag at that 1/2 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and end, and after you sew it, of course, you want to overlock it. Of course, as always, make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end of your work. And a pocket bag gets a lot of wear and tear, so be very careful with that. And follow your notches at your 1/2 inch seam allowance. All right, so if you want some horizontal top stitching, that is what you can do at the top of your welt next. I've elected not to do that. So if you do want that, now is the time to do that horizontal top stitch. But I'm not going to put a stitch going across from left to right on my welt. I'm just going to sew the welt directly to the garment. So through all the layers, vertically on the left and right side, making sure to cover the opening edges. So I'm following a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And that's it. I'll see you in class.